Hello. On this beautiful autumn day, I've found a perfect spot to show you how you can customize any flat style of shoe for yourself or your family, friends, and possibly even as a business, because especially people with wide feet or those who wear orthotics might really be looking for you to help make them something that they could not ever buy in a store. And we're working with the chukka boot pattern, but it can work for any of the patterns that I have in my books. My books are all on my website, simpleshoemaking.com. They're all free, and you can use any of the patterns, the chukka boot, the center seam flat, I call them cinch tops, and I'm going to be adding more. These shoes can be made as stitch down. That would be the primary technique that we would use. Some of them can be made as stitch ins, which you can see that process on another one of my videos. I've taken patterns from how to make simple ecological shoes for women in the size that seems right for the person who's going to be my model. I drew around her foot. Here's the toes. You can see the shape that she had. Maybe 1/4 of an inch in the toe area and smoothed it out so that I get this sole shape. I use the pattern not because it's going to be the same. It can give curves that make it look like a natural shape. So this is what we came up with, and when I measured this, it was in the range of size 6. So that's why I cut out the upper patterns, the vamp and the heel section part, in size 6. Now I'm going to make something called the frame, and you will understand it better as we go along. But to make the frame, I am adding 1/8 of an inch all the way around the edge of this original sole pattern. The reason that I'm adding 1/8 of an inch to the sole pattern is that it's a windy day. You'll see later that we're going to put a felt over the foot and fit it inside this frame, and you need a little wiggle room. The felt has a hard time getting in place if the opening isn't a little bit larger. And I'm using that to draw around on a piece of cardboard. If you have a used USPS cardboard box around, that makes a really nice frame. So I drew around this sole with the 1/8 of an inch added and cut it out, and there I have my frame. So I wanted it to be about 1 inch wide, so I took my compass and set it at 1 inch. So I drew a line around and then cut it out so that I had this 1 inch frame. And these are stitch lines. And to make these stitch lines, I first decided, well, 1/4 of an inch, that looks really good, but that's kind of close together, a lot more stitches. But 1/2 an inch is really kind of far apart, so I'm going to settle for 3/8 of an inch between stitches. So I made a little cardboard piece that is 3/8 of an inch wide and moved it along to make these stitch marks. I started at the middle of the heel, where the heel seam would go, and I centered it on that heel seam so that 3/16 of an inch is on one side, 3/16 of an inch is on the other side. I do this because if you're making, say, a flat shoe and it has a seam at the back. You don't want to have a stitch mark right on that line. You want it to be on either side of that line. So I went along here with my little measuring device and my marker and marked off 3/8 of an inch all the way around the edge. Notice when you move this little measuring tab 3/8 of an inch, you don't line it up with the previous marks. What you line it up with is the edge of the sole pattern, so that these marks radiate out from the sole. A couple of other things about the frame. One is that it's important to mark the halfway point. And I found the halfway point and made these lines across, these darker lines. Of course, you don't want them to go over a stitch mark, and you want them to be directly across from each other, so you do your best to pick where to put that line, but as close as you can get to it being the halfway point. Now I'm making a mock-up of the upper, and I'm using a piece of felt. I took the upper patterns, the vamp, and then of course the heel pattern needed to be doubled, so I copied this and taped them together. I drew them on the felt, but you notice that it looks more like a clown shoe. I added about 1.5 inches around the bottom edge of the whole thing, and I punched holes so that we could have a mock-up that was exactly how the actual shoe would be. Something that I forgot to say when I originally filmed this video was about the center line. It's very important. You can see from this pattern from the book that it has a mark in the front to show where the center of the toe is. So fold it to find out where the center of the tab is and make a line, and then copy that onto the felt piece and do the same for the sole. But what I do is find the center of the heel, which I can fold it and find that center point, draw a line across the ball of the foot, find the center of that and make a point, and then use those 2 points to continue that line out into the area of the toe, so you've got something that you can line up when you are draping the felt over the customer's foot. A few other things that I did. One is there's a line about 3/8 of an inch in on the vamp pattern where the vamp and the heel part meet up, and there needs to be a stitched line here, but with different people it kind of varies where that line is. So I just made a little X at the bottom, so that's one of the things that we'll be checking, because we're going to put this over my friend Mariasha's foot, and then we'll be able to see exactly where that line goes. I made a couple of slits here, one at this 1.5 inch part that I added so it can spread out, and then at the top of the heel where the heel seam would be, just so we can see where is the right height for her. We're moving along here. Here's the frame, and it's up Mariasha's leg, and then we put the felt mock-up over her foot, and I tied the laces so it seemed like it was about in the right place. So everything is ready for the next stage, which is to bring the frame down and frame this upper. It's a good idea to make a little layer of corrugated cardboard so that you have something that will lift up the toes so that the toes don't end up being squashed. You want some room there. Put that under the toes, and then you will assure that there'll be enough room for them. Putting this frame down around your foot, and I want to make sure that the halfway mark lines up, and it doesn't. Let's see the other side. Yes. So what I'm going to do is move this back and put a little clip. So have some little clips handy. Clip it where it might work better, and then let's see if that lines me up with the halfway mark. And it does. So now we've got the proportions right here. So I'm going to make a mark where that clip is, so I'll know to remove that much on both sides from that heel seam. Now I draw around here. Excuse me. And I also draw this line. The only thing left to do now is transfer these stitch marks up to the upper. So here I go. The next thing that we'll do will be to actually make a mock-up shoe using this felt model and see if there's any more changes that might need to be made. And then once we have that assurance, then we can use these stitch marks and make the actual chuck-a-boot. I made an error here in that I started making stitch marks on the inside of the foot, and I wish that I had started making stitch marks on the outside of the foot. The reason being that when you are finished making all these stitch marks around, when you get close to that mark that is on the side of the heel seam, it might be that the final stitch will be a little narrow or a little wide. So if you have about 3 stitches that you can absorb that in, then none of them are noticeably different from the rest of the stitch marks. However, it's best to have that on the inside of the foot. That's why I say start making your marks on the outside of the foot so they're all the same size, and if there's any that are a little bit different, then they would end up here on the inside of the foot at the heel where it wouldn't be at all noticeable. Since these chuck-a-boots are going to be stitch downs, before I make the pattern, I have to add a 1/4 inch or maybe 5/16 of I'm going to add that around the upper pattern, and I'll measure that, and I'll do the same thing with the sole, because the upper leather is going to fold out and spread out onto the sole, and we need that extra material. Even if you're making a stitch in, you still need at least 1/4 inch and maybe up to 3/8 to turn in. But you'll find out what that right measurement is when you make your actual mock-up. She was surprised that she wears such a small shoe, and that she always buys sizes 2 or 3 bigger than what we have made here. And I suspect it's because having a wide foot, she buys shoes that are much bigger in the length than she needs, which is pretty common and not a very healthy way to walk, to have all that space out there in front of the toe. If you found this video useful to you, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks.